Sarah Martinez stood at her kitchen window, watching the morning sun paint golden streaks across her small apartment. At 24 years old, she had grown accustomed to the quiet routine of caring for her twin sister Emma. They had been inseparable since birth, sharing everything from clothes to dreams, but life had dealt them a cruel hand that changed everything. Emma had been born with a rare heart condition that doctors said would require lifelong monitoring. While Sarah grew up strong and healthy, Emma's world revolved around medications, doctor visits, and careful management of her energy levels. Their parents had passed away in a car accident 3 years ago, leaving Sarah as Emma's primary caregiver and the only family she had left. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Sarah prepared Emma's breakfast, carefully measuring out her heart medications and arranging them beside a glass of water. Emma emerged from their shared bedroom, moving slowly as she always did, her pale complexion a constant reminder of her fragile health. "How are you feeling today?" Sarah asked, studying her sister's face for any signs of distress. She had learned to read Emma's expressions like a medical textbook, watching for the subtle changes that might signal trouble. "I'm okay," Emma replied, though her voice carried a slight breathlessness that hadn't been there the day before. She settled into her chair at their small dining table, picking at the toast Sarah had prepared. "Just tired, I guess." Sarah felt a familiar knot of worry form in her stomach. Emma had been saying she was just tired more frequently lately, and her appetite had been decreasing. The twins had learned not to panic at every small change, but Sarah's protective instincts were always on high alert. After breakfast, Sarah helped Emma get dressed and ready for the day. They had planned to visit the local library, one of Emma's favorite places where she could lose herself in books while Sarah worked on her laptop nearby. Sarah worked as a freelance graphic designer, a job that allowed her the flexibility to care for Emma while still earning enough to cover their medical expenses and living costs. As they walked the 3 blocks to the library, Sarah noticed Emma stopping more frequently than usual. Her breathing seemed labored and small beads of sweat appeared on her forehead despite the cool morning air. "Emma, are you sure you're feeling all right?" Sarah asked, gently taking her sister's arm. Emma paused, pressing her hand against her chest. "My heart feels different today, like it's working too hard." She looked at Sarah with eyes that held a mixture of fear and exhaustion. "Maybe we should go back home." They turned around immediately, but Emma's condition seemed to worsen with each step. By the time they reached their apartment building, Emma was struggling to catch her breath. Sarah helped her sister up the stairs, feeling Emma's weight lean heavily against her with each step. Once inside their apartment, Sarah settled Emma on the couch and knelt beside her, watching as her sister's breathing became increasingly shallow. Emma's lips had taken on a slightly bluish tint, something Sarah had never seen before but instinctively knew was dangerous. "I think we need to go to the clinic," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice calm while her mind raced with worry. "This doesn't seem like your usual tired day." Emma nodded weakly, unable to speak without gasping for air. Sarah quickly gathered Emma's medical records, insurance cards, and current medications, stuffing them into a large purse along with a bottle of water and some snacks. She had learned from experience that medical visits could take hours, and being prepared was essential. The community clinic was only a 15-minute drive from their apartment, but traffic seemed unusually heavy that morning. Sarah gripped the steering wheel tightly, glancing frequently at Emma, who sat slumped in the passenger seat with her eyes closed. Every red light felt like an eternity, and Sarah found herself whispering prayers under her breath. When they finally arrived at the Riverside Community Clinic, Sarah parked as close to the entrance as possible and helped Emma out of the car. Emma's legs seemed unsteady, and Sarah had to support most of her weight as they walked through the sliding glass doors. The waiting room was packed with patients of all ages. Mothers held crying babies, elderly people sat quietly reading magazines, and teenagers slouched in chairs while scrolling through their phones. The air was thick with the smell of disinfectant and the sound of muffled conversations. Sarah approached the reception desk where a woman in her 50s sat typing at a computer without looking up. Her name tag read Margaret, Patient Services. "Excuse me," Sarah said, her voice tight with urgency. "My sister is having trouble breathing. She has a heart condition and needs to see a doctor right away." Margaret continued typing for several more seconds before finally glancing up with an expression of mild annoyance. She looked past Sarah to Emma, who was leaning heavily against the reception counter, her breathing still labored. Do you have an appointment? Margaret asked in a monotone voice, already reaching for a clipboard with forms attached. No, we don't have an appointment, Sarah replied, her patience beginning to fray. This is an emergency. She needs medical attention now. Margaret sighed dramatically and shook her head. I'm sorry, but Dr. Peterson is completely booked today. The earliest we could fit you in would be next Thursday, and that's only if we have a cancellation. Sarah stared at the receptionist in disbelief. You don't understand. My sister has a serious heart condition. She's having difficulty breathing and her lips are turning blue. This can't wait until next Thursday. Look, honey, Margaret said, her tone becoming more condescending. Everyone thinks their situation is an emergency. We have procedures here. If you don't have an appointment, you'll need to go to the emergency room at the hospital. That's 20 miles away, but they take walk-ins. Sarah felt her frustration boiling over. 20 miles? She can barely stand up right now. Surely there's something you can do. Can't the doctor just take a quick look at her? Margaret's expression hardened. Dr. Peterson is with patients who had the courtesy to make appointments. I'm not going to interrupt his schedule for every person who shows up demanding immediate attention. That's not how this works. Emma suddenly gripped Sarah's arm tightly, her face contorting in pain. Sarah, she whispered, something's really wrong. My chest. It hurts so much. Sarah turned back to Margaret with desperation in her eyes. Please, just let the doctor know we're here. She's getting worse. Can't you see she needs help? The answer is no, Margaret replied firmly. You'll have to find somewhere else to go. I suggest you leave now before you disturb our other patients. Sarah looked around the waiting room, hoping to find support from other patients or perhaps another staff member who might be more sympathetic. But everyone seemed absorbed in their own concerns and no other clinic employees were visible. With no other choice, Sarah helped Emma back toward the exit, her mind racing to figure out their next move. The hospital emergency room was indeed 20 miles away, and she wasn't sure Emma could handle the journey in her current state. But what other choice did they have? As Sarah helped Emma back to their car, she could feel her sister's condition deteriorating with each passing minute. Emma's breathing had become even more labored, and her skin felt cold and clammy to the touch. The walk from the clinic entrance to their parked car, which should have taken less than a minute, stretched into what felt like an eternity. I can't catch my breath, Emma gasped, stopping halfway to the car and gripping Sarah's arm with surprising strength. Her fingernails dug into Sarah's skin, a sign of how much pain she was experiencing. Sarah looked back at the clinic building, anger and desperation warring in her chest. Through the large windows, she could see Margaret still sitting at the reception desk, probably helping the next patient as if nothing had happened. The casual dismissal of Emma's obvious distress felt like a betrayal of everything Sarah believed about healthcare and human compassion. Okay, we're going to the hospital, Sarah decided, though her voice shook with uncertainty. 20 miles felt like an impossible distance given Emma's current state. Just hold on to me, Emma. We're going to get through this. They finally reached the car, and Sarah carefully helped Emma into the passenger seat. She adjusted the seat to recline slightly, hoping it might help Emma breathe more easily. Before starting the engine, Sarah grabbed her phone and dialed 911, wondering if she should have done this from the beginning. 1. What's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm and professional. My sister's having trouble breathing. She has a heart condition and we were just turned away from the clinic. I'm not sure if I should try to drive her to the hospital or wait for an ambulance, Sarah explained, her words tumbling out quickly. What's your current location? The operator asked. Sarah provided the address of the clinic parking lot and described Emma's symptoms in detail. The operator asked several questions about Emma's medical history, current medications, and the timeline of her symptoms. Based on what you're describing, I'm going to dispatch an ambulance to your location, the operator decided. Stay on the line with me and don't attempt to drive. The paramedics should be there within 8 minutes. Relief flooded through Sarah, though she remained focused on monitoring Emma's condition. She reached over and took her sister's hand, which felt frighteningly cold despite the warm car interior. Help is coming, Emma. Just focus on breathing slowly and staying calm, Sarah said, though she was struggling to follow her own advice. While they waited, Sarah couldn't help but replay the scene at the clinic in her mind. She understood that medical facilities had procedures and scheduling requirements, but surely there should be exceptions for genuine emergencies. Emma's symptoms weren't subtle or ambiguous. They were clearly visible signs of serious distress. Emma's breathing became increasingly erratic, and she started making small whimpering sounds with each exhale. Sarah had never felt so helpless in her life. All the years of managing Emma's condition, all the careful attention to medications and warning signs, and still she found herself in a situation where she couldn't protect her sister from whatever was happening. "The pain is getting worse," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. "It feels like someone is squeezing my heart." Sarah squeezed Emma's hand gently, fighting back tears. "The ambulance will be here any minute. They'll know exactly what to do." True to the operator's estimate, Sarah heard sirens approaching after what felt like the longest 8 minutes of her life. A bright red ambulance pulled into the clinic parking lot, followed closely by a fire truck. Sarah had never been so happy to see emergency vehicles. 2 paramedics quickly approached their car, carrying medical equipment and moving with practiced efficiency. The first paramedic, a woman in her 30s with kind eyes, introduced herself as Lisa, while immediately beginning to assess Emma's condition. "Hi Emma, I'm Lisa. Can you tell me how you're feeling right now?" she asked while checking Emma's pulse and observing her breathing pattern. "Can't breathe. Chest hurts," Emma managed to say between gasps. Lisa's partner, a tall man named David, was already setting up portable monitoring equipment. Within seconds, they had Emma connected to devices that began displaying her vital signs on a small screen. "Her oxygen saturation is dangerously low," Lisa said to David, her professional demeanor not quite hiding her concern. "We need to get her oxygen immediately and prepare for transport." Sarah watched as the paramedics worked with swift precision, placing an oxygen mask over Emma's face and starting an IV line. Emma's color began to improve slightly with the supplemental oxygen, though her breathing remained labored. "What hospital are you taking her to?" Sarah asked, gathering Emma's medical records and medications from her purse. "St. Mary's Hospital has the best cardiac unit in the area," Lisa replied while securing Emma to a stretcher. "It's about 15 minutes away with lights and sirens. Are you family?" "I'm her twin sister and primary caregiver," Sarah explained, handing over Emma's medical information. "Our parents passed away, so I'm all she has." "You can ride with us," David said, helping Sarah climb into the back of the ambulance. "We'll need all her medical history and any information about her current symptoms." As the ambulance pulled away from the clinic parking lot, Sarah noticed Margaret at the reception desk looking out the window with what appeared to be surprise and concern. For a brief moment, Sarah wondered if the receptionist was finally realizing the seriousness of the situation they had dismissed so carelessly. During the ride to the hospital, Lisa continued monitoring Emma's vital signs while asking Sarah detailed questions about Emma's medical history, current medications, and the timeline of her symptoms that morning. Sarah provided as much information as she could, grateful that she had always been diligent about keeping detailed records of Emma's health. "Has she experienced anything like this before?" Lisa asked, while adjusting Emma's oxygen flow. "Never this severe," Sarah replied. "She gets tired and short of breath sometimes, but nothing like this. And I've never seen her lips turn blue before." The ambulance swayed slightly as David navigated through traffic, the sirens clearing their path toward the hospital. Sarah held Emma's hand, noting that it felt slightly warmer now with the oxygen support, though Emma's eyes remained closed and her breathing still seemed difficult. "Her blood pressure is dropping," Lisa observed, checking the monitor readings. "David, can you radio ahead to St. Mary's? Tell them we're coming in with a 24-year-old female with a history of congenital heart disease, presenting with severe dyspnea, cyanosis, and hypotension. ETA 10 minutes. Sarah didn't understand all the medical terminology, but the urgency in Lisa's voice made it clear that Emma's condition was indeed serious. She felt a mixture of validation and terror. Validation that her instincts about Emma needing immediate medical attention had been correct, and terror about what might happen next. "Is she going to be okay?" Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she was ready to hear the answer. Lisa met her eyes with a compassionate expression. "The doctors at St. Mary's are excellent, and we're getting her there quickly. That's the most important thing right now. The ambulance pulled up to St. Mary's Hospital emergency entrance with a sharp turn that made Sarah grip the side rail tightly. Through the small window, she could see medical staff already waiting outside, having received David's radio transmission about their incoming patient. The back doors of the ambulance flew open, and suddenly Emma's stretcher was surrounded by a team of hospital personnel. A doctor with graying temples and intense blue eyes immediately began firing questions at Lisa while examining Emma. "Dr. Rodriguez, cardiology," he introduced himself quickly to Sarah. 24-year-old with congenital heart disease, correct? How long has she been experiencing these symptoms? Sarah hurried alongside the stretcher as they rushed through the hospital corridors, answering Dr. Rodriguez's questions while trying not to trip over the various medical equipment and personnel moving with them. The fluorescent lights overhead created a disorienting blur of brightness as they navigated toward what she assumed was the cardiac unit. She started feeling tired this morning. More than usual, Sarah explained breathlessly. Then the breathing problem started about an hour ago, and it's been getting worse rapidly. They reached a treatment room where the medical team quickly transferred Emma from the ambulance stretcher to a hospital bed. Within seconds, Emma was connected to multiple monitors that filled the room with a symphony of beeps and electronic sounds. Sarah pressed herself against the wall, trying to stay out of the way while keeping Emma in sight. "Sarah?" Emma's voice was muffled by the oxygen mask, but her eyes were open and searching for her sister. "I'm right here," Sarah said, moving to Emma's bedside and taking her hand. "You're at the hospital now. These doctors are going to help you." Dr. Rodriguez was studying the readouts from the cardiac monitors with deep concentration. "Her heart rhythm is irregular, and these enzyme levels suggest she may be experiencing cardiac distress," he said to a nurse who was recording information on a tablet. A young resident doctor approached Sarah with a clipboard. "I need to get some additional information about your sister's medical history. Can you tell me about her specific heart condition?" Sarah recited the information she knew by heart after years of medical appointments. Emma had been born with a ventricular septal defect, a hole in the wall between the heart's lower chambers. While it had been surgically repaired when she was 2 years old, she required ongoing monitoring because the repair could weaken over time. "When was her last cardiology appointment?" the resident asked. 6 weeks ago, Sarah replied. Everything seemed stable then. Her cardiologist said her heart function looked good and scheduled the next appointment for 3 months out. Dr. Rodriguez approached them after reviewing Emma's test results. "We're going to need to do some additional tests, including an echocardiogram and some blood work. The initial readings suggest there may be a problem with her heart function, possibly related to her previous surgery." Sarah felt the floor seem to shift beneath her feet. "What kind of problem?" "It's too early to say definitively," Dr. Rodriguez replied with professional caution. "But there are signs that suggest her heart isn't pumping as effectively as it should be. This could be temporary due to an infection or other factors, or it could indicate that the surgical repair is experiencing complications." A technician arrived with an ultrasound machine, and Dr. Rodriguez explained they would be performing an echocardiogram to get real-time images of Emma's heart function. Sarah watched as they applied gel to Emma's chest and began moving the ultrasound probe across her skin. On the monitor, Sarah could see grainy black and white images that meant nothing to her. But she watched Dr. Rodriguez's face carefully for any reaction. His expression remained neutral, but she noticed him asking the technician to focus on specific areas and take multiple measurements. "The left ventricle isn't contracting as strongly as it should," Dr. Rodriguez explained quietly to the resident, though Sarah could hear every word. "And there appears to be some fluid accumulation around the heart." Emma squeezed Sarah's hand weakly. Even with the oxygen mask, her breathing still seemed labored, though not quite as desperate as it had been in the car. "Am I going to be okay?" Emma asked when a nurse temporarily removed her oxygen mask to check her temperature. Dr. Rodriguez sat down beside Emma's bed, his manner becoming more gentle and personal. "We're going to do everything we can to help you feel better. Your heart is working harder than it should right now, which is why you're having trouble breathing. We're going to give you some medications to help your heart work more efficiently and remove some of the extra fluid that's built up." Over the next hour, Sarah watched as the medical team administered various medications through Emma's IV. Gradually, Emma's breathing became less labored and some color returned to her cheeks. The constant beeping of the monitor settled into a more regular rhythm. The medication seemed to be helping, a nurse named Patricia told Sarah. Her oxygen levels are improving, and her heart rate is stabilizing. Sarah felt some of the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. Does this mean she's going to be okay? Patricia smiled kindly but cautiously. She's responding well to the treatment, which is a good sign. Dr. Rodriguez will be able to give you more information once all the test results are back. During the quieter moments between medical procedures, Sarah found herself thinking about the clinic receptionist who had turned them away. If they had waited for an appointment or tried to drive 20 miles to another hospital, would Emma's condition have deteriorated to a life-threatening level? The thought made Sarah both angry and grateful. Angry at the dismissive treatment they had received, but grateful that she had trusted her instincts and called for emergency help. Dr. Rodriguez returned with a folder full of test results. The good news is that your sister appears to be experiencing acute heart failure, which sounds frightening but is often treatable and reversible. What caused it? Sarah asked. Most likely a combination of factors, Dr. Rodriguez explained. Sometimes the scar tissue from childhood heart surgery can affect heart function years later, especially if there's an infection or other stress on the body. We found evidence of a recent viral infection that may have triggered this episode. Emma listened quietly, her breathing now much easier with the medications and oxygen support. Will I need another surgery? Not necessarily, Dr. Rodriguez said. Many patients respond well to medication management. We'll need to monitor you closely for the next few days and possibly adjust your long-term medications, but surgery is not our first option. Sarah felt tears of relief welling up in her eyes. The crisis wasn't over, but at least they had answers and a treatment plan. We'll be admitting her to the cardiac unit for observation, Dr. Rodriguez continued. I want to make sure the medications continue to work effectively and that her heart function stabilizes before we consider discharge. As Emma was prepared for transfer to her hospital room, Sarah reflected on how quickly everything had changed that morning. They had started the day planning a quiet visit to the library, and now they were facing a serious cardiac emergency. But they were also surrounded by competent medical professionals who had taken Emma's symptoms seriously and acted quickly to help her. Emma's room in the cardiac unit was quiet, except for the gentle humming of medical equipment and the occasional footsteps of nurses in the hallway. Sarah had pulled a reclining chair close to Emma's bed and hadn't left her sister's side for the past 18 hours. Hospital staff had provided her with blankets and pillows, understanding that separating the twins during this crisis would only add unnecessary stress. The morning sun streamed through the large window, casting warm light across Emma's face as she slept peacefully for the first time since her symptoms had begun. The medications had worked remarkably well. Her breathing was now regular and unlabored. Her color had returned to normal, and the cardiac monitors showed steady, stable rhythms. Dr. Rodriguez had stopped by twice during the night to check on Emma's progress, and each visit brought increasingly positive news. The fluid around Emma's heart was decreasing, her blood oxygen levels had normalized, and her heart function was showing signs of improvement. Sarah dozed fitfully in the chair, waking periodically to check on Emma or respond to nurses who came in to administer medications and check vital signs. She had called her boss to explain the situation and arrange for her current graphic design projects to be postponed. Thankfully, her clients were understanding, and her flexible work schedule meant that missing a few days wouldn't create financial disaster. Around mid-morning, Emma woke up looking more alert and comfortable than she had in over 24 hours. "How are you feeling?" Sarah asked, immediately moving to Emma's bedside. "So much better," Emma replied, her voice clear and strong. "I can actually breathe without feeling like I'm drowning, and the chest pain is completely gone." A knock on the door interrupted their conversation, and Dr. Rodriguez entered with a smile that immediately lifted Sarah's spirits. "Good morning, ladies. Emma, you look like a completely different person than the young woman who came in yesterday," he said, checking the latest readings on Emma's monitors. "I feel like a different person," Emma replied. "Whatever you did, it worked." Dr. Rodriguez pulled up a chair and sat down, indicating he had time for a thorough conversation. "The medications have been very effective in improving your heart function. Your ejection fraction, that's a measurement of how well your heart is pumping, has improved significantly overnight. What happens now?" Sarah asked. We'll continue monitoring for another day or two to make sure the improvement is stable, Dr. Rodriguez explained. Then we'll work with your regular cardiologist to adjust your long-term medication regimen. You'll probably need to take additional medications permanently to support your heart function, but many people live completely normal lives with this type of management. Emma nodded thoughtfully. Will this happen again? It's possible, but much less likely if we manage your condition proactively, Dr. Rodriguez assured her. The key is regular monitoring and adjusting medications as needed. Think of it like managing diabetes or high blood pressure. It requires attention, but it's very manageable. After Dr. Rodriguez left, Emma and Sarah spent the quiet morning hours talking about everything that had happened and what it might mean for their future. They had always been close, but the near crisis had reminded them both how precious their time together was. I keep thinking about that woman at the clinic, Emma said. What if you hadn't called the ambulance? What if we had tried to drive to the other hospital? Sarah had been wondering the same thing. I don't know, and I try not to think about it too much. What matters is that you got the help you needed. But other people might not be so lucky, Emma continued. What if someone else goes through what we went through, but they don't have anyone to advocate for them, or they give up and go home? Sarah could see that Emma was working through something important in her mind. Despite her gentle nature, Emma had always had a strong sense of justice and concern for others. Maybe we should do something about it, Emma suggested. I mean, I understand that clinics have procedures, but surely there should be some way to handle genuine emergencies. What did you have in mind? I don't know yet, but maybe we could talk to someone in charge at the clinic, or write a letter explaining what happened and how it could have been handled better. Sarah felt proud of her sister's desire to turn their difficult experience into something positive. It was typical of Emma to focus on helping others even while she was still recovering from her own medical crisis. That afternoon, they received an unexpected visitor. A woman in her 40s wearing a business suit knocked on the door and introduced herself as Jennifer Walsh, the administrator of Riverside Community Clinic. Ms. Martinez, I heard about what happened yesterday morning at our clinic, and I wanted to apologize personally and learn more about your experience. Sarah and Emma exchanged surprised glances. They hadn't expected anyone from the clinic to follow up on what had happened. Please sit down, Emma said, gesturing to the extra chair in the room. Jennifer sat down and pulled out a small notebook. First, I want to say how sorry I am that you didn't receive the care you needed when you came to us for help. That's not the kind of service we want to provide to our community. How did you find out what happened? Sarah asked. One of our nurses mentioned seeing an ambulance in our parking lot yesterday, and when I asked around, I learned about your visit from Margaret, Jennifer explained. I've already spoken with Margaret about the situation, and we're implementing some changes to make sure this doesn't happen again. Jennifer went on to explain that the clinic would be instituting new protocols for handling potential medical emergencies. All front desk staff would receive training on recognizing signs of serious medical distress, and they would establish a system for having medical personnel quickly assess patients who appeared to be experiencing urgent symptoms. We're also going to create a policy that allows our medical staff to interrupt their scheduled appointments for genuine emergencies, Jennifer added. Looking at your sister's medical history and symptoms, this clearly qualified as an emergency situation. Emma listened thoughtfully to Jennifer's explanation. I appreciate that you're making changes, but I'm curious, what happened to Margaret? Jennifer looked uncomfortable for a moment. Margaret has been with us for many years, and she's generally a good employee. However, her handling of your situation showed poor judgment. She's been given additional training on our patient service standards, and will be working under closer supervision for the next few months. Will she still be working at the front desk? Sarah asked. Yes, but with additional oversight and training. We believe in giving people opportunities to improve rather than immediate termination, especially when someone has been a long-term employee. After Jennifer left, Sarah and Emma discussed whether they felt satisfied with the clinic's response. Both agreed that the policy changes sounded positive, though they wondered whether Margaret would truly change her approach to patient care. At least other people won't have to go through what we went through, Emma said, and maybe Margaret learned something from this experience. That evening, Dr. Rodriguez stopped by with more good news. Emma's latest test results showed continued improvement in her heart function, and he was optimistic about discharging her the following day. You'll need to take it easy for the next few weeks while your heart fully recovers, he advised. No strenuous activities and pay attention to any return of symptoms like shortness of breath or chest pain. As Sarah prepared for another night in the hospital chair, she reflected on how much their lives had changed in just 2 days. Emma would need more careful monitoring and additional medications, but they had also learned valuable lessons about advocating for medical care and trusting their instincts when something seemed wrong. 3 weeks after Emma's discharge from the hospital, the twins had settled into a new routine that balanced Emma's recovery needs with their return to normal life. Emma's energy levels had improved dramatically with her adjusted medications, and she was able to resume most of her regular activities with only minor modifications. Sarah had been working from home more frequently, keeping a closer eye on Emma while completing her graphic design projects. Her clients had been understanding about the temporary disruption, and she had even gained 2 new clients who had heard about her situation and admired her dedication to family. On a sunny Thursday morning, Sarah received a phone call that would change their perspective on the entire hospital experience. "Is this Sarah Martinez?" asked a professional-sounding woman on the other end of the line. "Yes, this is Sarah. My name is Linda Patterson, and I'm a reporter with Channel 7 News. I understand that you and your sister had an experience at Riverside Community Clinic that resulted in some changes to their emergency procedures." Sarah felt her stomach tighten with nervousness. "How did you hear about that?" "Someone from the hospital mentioned your story to one of our health reporters. We're working on a piece about patient advocacy and emergency medical care access. Would you be willing to share your experience?" Sarah looked over at Emma, who was reading on the couch and had obviously heard enough of the conversation to understand what was being discussed. "Can I call you back? I need to talk to my sister about this." After hanging up, Sarah explained the reporter's request to Emma. They spent the next hour discussing whether sharing their story publicly would be helpful or potentially problematic. "I think we should do it," Emma finally decided. "If it helps other people understand their rights as patients or encourages medical facilities to take emergency situations more seriously, then it's worth it." "Are you sure? Once it's on the news, we can't take it back." Emma nodded firmly. "I'm sure. Besides, we don't have anything to hide. We handled the situation responsibly, and the clinic has already acknowledged they made mistakes." Sarah called Linda Patterson back and arranged for an interview the following week. The reporter was professional and respectful, focusing on the broader issues of patient advocacy and emergency care access, rather than sensationalizing their personal drama. The news story aired on a Tuesday evening, featuring interviews with Sarah and Emma, Dr. Rodriguez from the hospital, and Jennifer Walsh from the clinic. The piece presented a balanced view of the situation, while highlighting the importance of recognizing medical emergencies and patient rights. The response to the news story was immediate and overwhelming. Sarah's phone began ringing with calls from other families who had experienced similar situations at various medical facilities. Some callers shared stories of being dismissed or turned away during medical emergencies, while others expressed gratitude that someone had spoken out about these issues. Emma received several messages through social media from people thanking her for sharing her story. One message particularly touched her. It was from a mother whose elderly father had been turned away from an urgent care center during a heart attack. The woman said that seeing Emma's story had encouraged her to file a formal complaint about their experience. "I had no idea this was such a common problem," Emma told Sarah after reading through dozens of messages and emails. "Neither did I," Sarah replied. "It makes me angry to think about how many people might have had worse outcomes than you did." Their story also caught the attention of patient advocacy groups and healthcare policy organizations. Sarah received a call from the state health department asking for more details about their experience as part of a larger review of emergency care protocols at community clinics. A week after the news story aired, Jennifer Walsh called Sarah again. "I wanted to let you know that your story has had a significant impact on our organization," Jennifer said. "Our parent company, which operates 12 clinics in the region, has decided to implement the emergency protocol changes we made at all of their locations." "That's wonderful news," Sarah replied. "How has it been working at your clinic?" "Very well. We've had 3 situations since the new protocols were implemented, where front desk staff recognized potential emergencies and immediately got medical personnel involved. In each case, the patient received prompt attention that might have been delayed under our old procedures. Jennifer also shared some news about Margaret that surprised both Sarah and Emma. Margaret has actually become one of our strongest advocates for the new emergency protocols. She told me that your sister's situation taught her that being protective of doctors' schedules isn't as important as being protective of patients' health. After sharing this conversation with Emma, they both felt a sense of closure about their experience with Margaret and the clinic. People can change, Emma observed. 1 year after Emma's medical crisis, the twins were preparing for what had become an annual tradition, returning to Riverside Community Clinic for Emma's routine checkup. This time, however, their visit would be very different from that terrifying morning when they had been turned away. Dr. Peterson, the physician who had been too busy to see Emma during her emergency, had specifically requested to meet with them. Jennifer Walsh had arranged for this appointment as part of the clinic's ongoing commitment to improving patient care and learning from past experiences. As they walked through the familiar sliding glass doors, Sarah noticed several changes to the clinic's layout and procedures. A large sign near the entrance clearly outlined the clinic's emergency protocols and patient rights. The waiting area had been redesigned to include a separate triage area where a nurse could quickly assess patients who appeared to be experiencing urgent symptoms. Margaret was still working at the reception desk, but her demeanor was completely transformed from their previous encounter. She looked up immediately when they entered, rising from her chair with a warm smile. "Ms. Martinez and Emma, welcome back," Margaret said genuinely. "Dr. Peterson is looking forward to meeting with you both." "How are you feeling, Emma?" "Much better, thank you," Emma replied, somewhat surprised by the warm reception. "The new medications have been working well." "I'm so glad to hear that," Margaret continued. "I want you to know that your experience here changed how I do my job. I've learned to listen more carefully to patients and their families, and I'm grateful that you shared your story publicly. It helped me become a better advocate for the people who come here for help." Sarah and Emma exchanged a look of pleasant surprise. They had hoped that positive changes would result from their experience, but seeing the personal transformation in Margaret was more meaningful than they had expected. Dr. Peterson met them in his office rather than an examination room, indicating that this would be more of a conversation than a typical medical appointment. He was a soft-spoken man in his 50s with kind eyes and a manner that immediately put them at ease. "First, I owe you both an apology," Dr. Peterson began. "On the morning you came here seeking help, I was seeing patients in my office just down the hall from where you were asking for assistance. I should have been notified about your sister's condition, and I should have interrupted my schedule to assess the situation." Emma leaned forward slightly. "Dr. Peterson, we understand that you have scheduled patients and procedures to follow. We're not here to blame anyone." "But that's exactly the problem," Dr. Peterson replied. "I had become so focused on maintaining my schedule and seeing my appointed patients that I lost sight of my primary responsibility, providing medical care to people who need it. Your sister clearly needed immediate attention, and our system failed her." Dr. Peterson went on to explain how Emma's case had been discussed extensively among the clinic's medical staff and had led to significant changes in how they approached patient care. "We now have a policy that any medical professional in the building can interrupt any appointment if they believe a patient needs immediate attention," he explained. "We've also trained our entire staff to recognize signs of medical distress and to err on the side of caution when assessing patients." "How has that been working?" Sarah asked. "Very well. In the past year, we've identified and treated several patients who might have been overlooked under our old procedures. We've also developed partnerships with the ambulance service and the hospital emergency department to ensure smoother transitions for patients who need higher levels of care." Dr. Peterson then surprised them by asking if he could examine Emma as part of her routine follow-up care. "I'd like the opportunity to provide you with the medical attention you should have received a year ago," he said with a gentle smile. During the examination, Dr. Peterson was thorough and attentive, asking detailed questions about Emma's symptoms, medications, and overall health status. He listened carefully to her heart and lungs, reviewed her recent test results, and discussed her treatment plan with both sisters. "Your heart function has remained stable, which is excellent news," Dr. Peterson reported. "The medications are clearly working well for you, and your activity tolerance seems to have improved significantly." After the medical examination, Dr. Peterson asked if they would be willing to participate in something special that the clinic was planning. We're developing a patient advisory committee to help us continue improving our services, he explained. We'd like to invite patients and family members who have experienced our care, both positive and challenging experiences, to provide ongoing feedback and suggestions. Emma was immediately interested in the opportunity. What would that involve? Monthly meetings where we discuss patient concerns, review our procedures, and brainstorm ways to make the clinic more responsive to patient needs, Dr. Peterson explained. We want to make sure that patient voices are heard in our decision-making processes. Both sisters agreed to participate in the advisory committee, seeing it as a natural extension of Emma's patient advocacy work. As they prepared to leave the clinic, Jennifer Walsh joined them for a brief conversation about the impact of their story on the broader healthcare community. Your willingness to share your experience publicly has influenced policy discussions throughout our regional healthcare system, Jennifer told them. Several other medical facilities have implemented similar emergency protocols, and patient advocacy has become a much more prominent topic in healthcare training programs. She handed them a folder containing letters from patients and healthcare professionals who had been influenced by Emma's story and advocacy work. These are just a few examples of the positive changes that have resulted from your courage in speaking out, Jennifer said. Many patients have received better care because you were willing to share your experience. That evening, Sarah and Emma sat in their apartment reading through the letters. Some were from patients who had received prompt emergency care because staff members had been trained to recognize urgent symptoms. Others were from healthcare professionals who had changed their approach to patient interactions after hearing Emma speak at conferences or reading about their experience. One letter particularly moved them both. It was from a young mother whose toddler had been experiencing breathing problems similar to Emma's symptoms. When the mother brought her child to an urgent care center, the receptionist had remembered Emma's story and immediately called for a medical assessment rather than asking the mother to wait for an available appointment. The child was diagnosed with a serious respiratory infection and received prompt treatment that prevented the situation from becoming life-threatening. This little boy is healthy today because of the changes that resulted from your advocacy, the mother had written. I will always be grateful that you had the courage to share your story and help make healthcare better for all of us. Emma wiped tears from her eyes as she finished reading the letter. I still can't believe that something so frightening turned into something that's helped so many people. You turned it into something positive, Sarah corrected. You could have just focused on your own recovery and moved on with your life. Instead, you chose to use your experience to help others. As they prepared for bed that night, both sisters reflected on how much their lives had changed over the past year. Emma's health had stabilized and she had discovered a passion for patient advocacy that had given her a sense of purpose beyond managing her medical condition. Sarah had learned valuable lessons about trusting her instincts and advocating for the people she loved. Their experience had also strengthened their relationship and deepened their appreciation for each other. They had faced a genuine crisis together and had emerged stronger, more confident, and more committed to making a positive difference in the world. The next morning, Emma received a call inviting her to speak at a national healthcare conference in Chicago. As she discussed the opportunity with Sarah, they both realized that their journey was far from over. What had begun as a terrifying medical emergency had evolved into a mission that was helping to improve healthcare for countless patients across the country. Are you ready for Chicago? Sarah asked with a smile. I'm ready for wherever this journey takes us, Emma replied. As long as we're helping people get the care they need, I'm ready for anything.